keep your eyes on the cultural aspects that have enriched you and continue to try in your own way, as perfect as can be, without a lot of self-sadism, without a lot of self-criticism, carry on and work slowly to perfecting. And you work with a body, so you would know more than any intellectual even how important practice is. It's important intellectually, but it's the person who works with a body who really knows that if you turn it off, you're dead. If you keep going, there is indeed a thing called perfection. Isn't that true?
Exactly. That is so important. I think we have to understand the intelligence of the body and how it works with your mental processes, how it helps you have a clearer state of mind, understanding the importance of health in your life. A lot of the people that I speak to, they might be up on certain parts, but they're very unaware of what their body is, and they actually almost demonize their own body. Everybody's so self-critical of their body, and they're so afraid and so shy, all the time physically because of all the mind control or whatever's out there in the media, that they have no connection to it, and they're actually missing a huge piece of the puzzle. And so I absolutely believe, get your chi flowing, get your energy flowing, get moving, find something that's right for you. For me, it was martial arts, but for you, it could be anything. And then that way you're going to start to actually become educated, because you're working with nature itself. You're working with the vehicle that you have to express your consciousness here in this world. And by doing that, your consciousness and your true imperial self will shine through more, because you're able to have a good metaphor in front of you every single day that's referencing these higher truths. And that's really what I see through these physical practices. So absolutely.
I agree wholeheartedly with that. It teaches you things that just by thinking mentally, and feeling, that's only part of it. You've got to get that body moving. I mean, I do it out of revenge, actually. I'm a very strange kind of bird. I do it for revenge of all those years I had to sit in the cubicle or in the classroom, in that Pink Floyd Bastille, where your body was, unlike in Steiner or Krishnamurti school, where they never allow you to do that. They get you out and they have a whole bunch of different ways that they get the kids to, negotiate uneven ground, walk on bare feet, work on those children's apparatus, where you'd find in an average, I don't know what they're
called. Like a jungle gym or whatever. Or
exactly.
Or something.
Yeah, exactly. To get into, I never went to one of those schools, so I was very envious of it. But I believe in the physical because of that it's revenge on those people who forced your somatic intelligence to be constrained, as you said, shackled, and sit there while they're force feeding your brain, but your body is uncoordinated, and then you do start hating it. Then if it's too flabby or you get too many pimples or whatever, and then what happens in Irish schools, probably in Britain as well, in America, is other kids would then pick on, the ugly ones or the fat ones or the weird ones, right? And so if you didn't have body hate to begin with, because you didn't have that in your home life, well, you're certainly going to have it by the time you've gone through school, because the other kids are just going to rag you to death, because you weren't able to run as fast or whatever. So this was, a key area in which not only constraining the physical energy of the body is lethal, it's absolutely diabolical. And it starts from the moment that you enter into the kindergarten or even the primary school. So one has to take revenge. I mean, I'm telling people right now, you need to avenge yourself on that level that your parents forced you to do that, the teachers did. And so Qigong and martial arts and Aikido, even in the early stages of Aikido for people, is very, very good, because it is literally it's giving the body that sigh of relief that it's wanted all those years. And it will help to dissipate the waves and waves of self-hatred, which is bringing us down. That self-hatred, again, we didn't talk about it in this interview, but that self-hatred is the hatred that the big brother co-ops. So again, solutions, physical movement, because it introduces you to your body, helps you get rid of your self-hate, and then you just uninstall from yourself one of the key things by which all tyrannical edifices, control you by. Not just the ancient trauma, that's their main focus, but your topical ontogenetic, meaning in this life, your waves and waves of I'm not tall enough, I'm not intellectual enough, I'm not thin enough, I'm not good looking enough, I'm not this enough.
Right.
All that, I'm not fast runner enough, whatever it might be, I'm not wealthy enough. All the waves and waves of self-violence that we do to ourselves can be one by one cancelled. And so the person who commits ritually, not just because they got nothing better to do, I'll go join the martial arts club around the corner, but if they come there willfully to know, I understand the purpose of why I'm doing this, then they're committed. And, the teacher and they have a rapport then, because there's actually an agenda now, there's an objective to reach. And so for me, it was always a matter of vengeance. I'm not going to let those ones who tied my body down, who constricted my somatic energy, and as I'm showing in this latest Path of the Fool episode, the Hermit, through the work of Wilhelm Reich, shadow work is actually body work. This is what they've all missed. All these fake writers and teachers trying to talk about Jung's shadow. They have never read Reich, so they don't know dick. They don't know that the shadow is actually the body. Okay, I agree that the shadow can be other things theoretically, but what it really is in its most pragmatic version is what Wilhelm Reich knew. It's the energy and the bioenergy contained within the body. And if that's not moving, then you don't have intelligence. You just got this hot thing in your skull called the brain, and you have the idea that that is intelligence. But intelligence is something far, far more incorporealized and fleshy and real. And so that is one of the big solutions of our world, is to get people out into the Tai Chis, eventually, like Bruce Lee, they can come up with their own thing. And even if they don't go in a formal class, I recommend that they do start synthesizing, or bringing together different disciplines and make up something of your own. But if you do have the inclination to get out and meet people as well, it's great to go and do martial arts and things like that, because it will be incredibly healing, not just on a physical healing point of view, but on a psychic healing point of view, and also on this conspiratorial level, you coming more into your center. And so the big brother has less power over you. You become like a warrior. It's like your own term that you use for yourself, truth warrior. That's exactly what I say it is as well.
Well, thank you for that, because this is actually the whole thesis that I'm trying to put together myself. It's what I've been feeling for a long time and just never maybe found the right context or the right words or the right timing until now at this stage in my life. And, I'm actually going to be also debunking a lot of the bullshit that's encoded in the martial art community as I see it, because it's also been turned into a lot of dogmas and a lot of, Bruce Lee spoke a lot about this, about these fixed patterns and getting everybody through repetition and doing all these things. And you lose that freedom of expression and that freedom of being, which is the whole point of this. And, using the conflict, or using the fact that, you're training an art of combat as a metaphor for your life, so that you're combating those negative forces that you have within you, the doubt, the fear, the trauma. You're combating this long-lived trauma that we've got within us. It's acting in very much the same way that yoga, the real yoga, was supposed to be used as a way of healing these things. So I've used it so many ways with children especially, and I've seen the most bullied, picked on, shadow of a self kid come in and turn into what I would consider a warrior, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And actually come in and start bringing the bullies in to sign up for the class, and then starting to turn them and make change in their lives, So this is the true, this is just, and there's many other ways, there's many other ways of doing it. But I personally like martial arts because, and especially in the context in which we're talking, because we are in a great war, because we're really trying to sharpen people's mettle again and get them in touch with their inner power and get them in touch with their capabilities and boost their confidence. I mean, you can't get into these kinds of subjects if you have no confidence and no inner knowing of who you are. You won't survive the journey. And I see it's happened to so many people in this alternative movement, where they just didn't have that good inner constitution within themselves, so they couldn't go past a certain point. And I think that's why this sort of idea needs to come out now, because it's a tremendous way to help bring that empowerment that's going to come, that will help then lead people to that greater knowledge.
You're totally right. And remember that self-esteem, or I call it the statement of higher value, that is not mentally, it's only partly mentally established. You have to do it through the body as well. You have to do it, as I said, as part of culture, like you were talking about the kid becoming, you've just introduced him, he's not just been introduced into martial arts, he's been introduced to his culture.
Right.
Or to a culture, and that is what inspires, because you become a being by being born, right? Your biology makes you a being, but the culture makes you a self. So a person cannot even find their statement of higher value, their self-esteem. You can read self-esteem books all day long, and it's very good that you should. Nathaniel Branden, other people that talk, but that's for the mind. Then now you can grasp the concept. How you actually really activate it is through the body. Another thing that happens with that as well is not just the shadow work, but the idea that how could you possibly be fighting Big Brother when you're getting fat and flabby on their food, on their drink, on their smokes, on just basically on their culture. You're in their culture. You're imbibing their culture. How can you get back to nature when you're living on the dead animals and so, things like that? So there's a whole ethos here to be taken on board, and the person who works with the body slowly starts to purge, from the conditioning also, that the less aware people are involved in, and they will end up, first of all, they're in the culture of the establishment, and they're going to end up more in it because they're going to end up taking the pharmaceutical drugs to ease their pain, and then finally they're going to end up, a big pharma in a situation in which the doctor or the hospital is taking care of them because they have no knowledge of their body. They're not even aware of why the body might even be ill, and also then they have to endure the agony and pain because they didn't look after the body, and the body's reaction to that will be, hey, there's going to be cancer, there's going to be all sorts of ill health. I agree that in certain people's cases that can be inflicted. Some of your ailments are not your cause. They were inflicted through stress and trauma by other evil people in your family and around you, for sure, and you have to deal with that. But in the most part, people have lived a very decadent life and they've had choices, and they simply think of the body as merely a vehicle, as you say, something to denigrate, something to compare with some other, pop hero or imbecile airhead, that the media has thrown up. But, those people are totally, utterly neurotic. So what are you comparing yourselves with them for? It's crazy. So yeah, it's partly also this deprogramming. These martial arts and things help you deprogram from the beast, which wants to keep you fluoridated, mercuryized, whatever way you look at it. But eating the white bread and the sugar and all of that stuff. People have to, if not cut that out, then at least massively downsize it so that then they can be a good model to any kids that are around them. A kid walks into your house and he sees a weight training setup or some freaking samurai swords. Friend for life.
Exactly.
If I've seen a throwing star, right, and it's somebody, because in London, when I lived as a child, a lot of people wear black belts and stuff. See if I ever even seen a throwing star. That was it. I wanted to never leave.
Exactly. It's it was something that captured me at a young age as well. And I think when I see that, I can tell the kids that are sort of forced into my class, they're just, their parents just bring them in, plop them down and go turn them into something. And then there's all those other kids that, they come in with this light in their eyes that's like, oh my God, I have to do this. This is just amazing. And once they catch on to it, you'd be surprised how you can turn like the most feeble looking, scrawny kid into a black belt that's out there winning gold medals and just shining like unbelievably. And it was all had to do with changing their mindset and inspiring them, just like you said. If you can pass on that torch of inspiration, man, you've made it contagious. You've brought out something good in that person. The healthy aspects of who they are will start to come out naturally. They just sometimes today, these kids, they're so absorbed in this anti-culture that's called culture that they don't have a reference point. They don't have role models anymore. They're very few and far between, especially from the parent level right up to whatever they're throwing out on the media or the school teachers or whatever. Now if you can just a little bit shine that light to them, especially with these young kids when their minds are just starting to form, then you're already doing humanity in this world a great service.
Yeah, and you can do it one by one. You see, the cultural aspect, healing the world isn't doing it in a grandiose way. It's the little martial art Taoist guy who just had a little backyard and he saw 4 or 5 people. That's changing the world.
Yeah,
it changed me. I was into Bruce Lee. When I was young, I was into the martial arts movies. Like the Word of Margin, which is a show that used to be shown in the 70s here. Old martial arts mania.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I love that, and anything like Monkey. All these different stories. And the mobility, because I actually believe that when people are talking about magic, martial arts is magic. Aikido, to me, is magic.
It is. It actually, Aikido is just talking about energy, moving energy, how to understand energy. And what are we talking about when we say energy? We're talking about that positive force, that magic.
But even the movements are magical. So that to me is magic. I don't look at it as being something supernatural. Magic and miracle is the movement of the body. In this constructive way where you're dealing with the life force. And of course, it's not just what people think is overcoming an enemy. It's all the other things we've just been talking about freeing yourself from any kind of control, being psychically immune, but it can be done mentally to a degree. It has to be done bodily. I'm now thinking back on it. Yeah, my uncle did know a couple of guys. They're from the East, but there was one Malaysian guy, I think, and one guy was like half Chinese or something like that, and they were martial arts. Just talking about it reminded me, I think the most hypnotizing thing I'd ever seen, the thing I loved beyond, was guitar. When I ever saw a guitar or had a chance to touch one, that was the most hypnotizing thing for me. But second to that was definitely, things connected to the martial arts. It was just incredible. And the whole idea that also, even in the act of combat, there's an integrity with the enemy. There's a common ground also.
Yeah, I've trained with many of some of my best friends, and we've had some of the most glorious wars together. And we look at each other as something that's going to sharpen each other's blade. Mm-hmm. Everybody comes in the dojo and they go, "Oh, you're beating up your friends, and what are you doing?" And it's just violence. And I'm like, "No, you're ignorant. You don't understand. There's a communication happening between two warriors. That's a totally different ballgame. Nobody's getting killed here. Nobody's enacting violence. Violence means violation. That's the thug on the street that's coming up to violate your sovereignty, and you need to know how to deal with that. But when you're talking about two warriors coming together to play the instrument of the body and work on it like a chess match, that's like looking at two chess masters and you're like, oh, you're beating each other up. You're so violent. It's a total misunderstanding of what's happening.
Mm-hmm. And they don't have the ones who are the thug version. I talk about in the Hermit, somatic dissociation, where parts of the body are numb, cold to the touch. People don't even realize this. So the thug is the person who's not comfortable in his body, whereas the martial artist is the one who's mastered his body. The temperature of his body is balanced. His homeostasis is balanced. He can stand for many hours. He can endure, and he can also, through the process you're talking about, get to know another person just with a glance of the eyes or the subtlest of body language. Whereas the thug, you see, he can't read any of that. He's basically dissociated in that as well. So the community is what you're talking about. It's not an act of violence. It's actually getting to know yourself through another, so that even the slightest look or the slightest gesture, and even sometimes even without those things, from even looking at a person just as they're sitting still or walking, you can tell what's on their mind. You can tell by looking at a photograph, what this person's going to do, or what level they're on, what mentality they're on, this kind of thing. All of these subtle senses that are not part of the five senses, but they're something deeper intuitions, deeper of the core self. But you can't even get to that level if you yourself are not only psychically dissociated, because we always think of mental illness being that exactly what I just said, mental. No. Long before you get the mental illness, you have to have somatic illness, meaning parts of your body don't exist. And then when you have an injury, right? When you have an injury of something like, a girlfriend once, she had a very bad foot injury and it persisted for years. She got it like skiing or something, but it turned out to be a persistent. Yeah, why? Because that's that part of the body calling to you for some other reason. And so you had the accident because there's something relating to that part of the body that got dissociated. Or a spine, or even a more serious injury. They will bug you, right? Because that's that part of the body trying to address itself to you. You didn't listen, so now it's going to have to be cut or injured or have some other, dystrophy attached to it, until you give it love, until you go there and take focus on your body again. But you can't even do that if your ethos, if your culture is completely saturated with your popcorn and your video game. The kids that see, like some of the kids that come into your dojo, right? They don't know their body. They know video games. If they're going to kill and do martial arts, it's through some digital, what do you call it? These video games, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
So what doing is taking them out of the video game and saying, no, do you realize you have a body? Stop moving that man around, that virtual man, and do it yourself.
It's better. It's better when you do it yourself. I mean, you're in the video. You are the video game. You're already in one.
Yes, but the difference is that on the video game, your mind can go crazy into the character. When you're having to do it with your own body, a different morality is involved, because now you have to actually sweat some sweat and blood. So your attitude is different to whom you're killing and whom you're engaging. If it's just a video game, then all the sadistic, pornographic stuff can come forth unabated. Exactly. Because it's just a video game and the guy dies, he's just a digital gelf. If it's you in combat, there's real fear, there's real attack, there's real feeling of pride if you win. There's all sorts of other mechanisms of the body and mind that stop the person being pathological. You know what I mean?
Right, it's true. And the last point I would make about that would be that when I just had a conversation with a parent of one of the kids, and they're like, well, you're showing them all these moves of combat, like they're going to go to school and they're going to start doing this on their friends. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand. They actually need something to vent and to express this energy through. It's not a negative thing at all. It's just become negative because there's a repression of it. And what happens is that they actually learn that they're not the only ones that get to do that hip toss or that, punch or kick or that Aikido move or whatever. Their partner gets to do it back on them right away. So they're actually learning that they're learning control. They're learning that, if I do that too hard, that actually hurts because I've had that done to me before. They understand, there's moments of victory, moments of defeat, moments of success, moments of failure. And they start to really get used to the flow of how life works. So they do need to get a couple knocks around the side of the head once in a while. They do need to get out there and be a little bit, in a positive, competitive atmosphere with their friends where they're just trying to bring out the best in themselves. And by doing that, you're not, and I've seen it 100% of the time, I don't have parents coming back really and saying, oh, my kid's out there beating people up because you're teaching them how to fight. I see the opposite. I see these kids becoming like the shining light in their schools where they're actually being role models and everybody wants to be like them because they're walking around with a sense of confidence that says, I don't need to mess with you. You don't even know how to fight. If I want a good fight, I'm going to go to the dojo tonight and do it with one of my friends who knows exactly what he's doing. And it's a totally different dynamic. And, it definitely relates to everything we've been discussing.
And think what will happen when that kid realizes he's a defender of those who are being picked on by some loathsome bully.
Yeah,
he can just grab his hand and break his finger and go, you'll never see that guy again.
Exactly.
That guy will never be, he'll cross the street when he sees us coming. That is a very, very tall thing, you see.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah, it really is. And so I'm a huge, huge believer in that. It's very needed. And remember, just as we use words to communicate in language, people forget there's a language of the body. The moves in martial arts and Tai Chi and stuff like that is a language. It's ABCs. It's an alphabet. But it's a language because people say, well, you keep on talking about all these other sensory inputs to the brain and all. Don't understand any of this. There's only 5 senses. No, there isn't. Just like there's not one alphabet or one language. The body's movements is an expression, is an art form, is an actual language communicating in the way that animals or birds, right? Because even our physical language, the one that is with words, derived from bird song and from animal song. This is a fact. The Gerald Massey's and so many other people have proven this beyond doubt. But your movements of your body are equally responses, equally forms of communication. But if you don't open them up, then your arms, your fingers, your legs, your body, your torso, your head, all of the meridians, all of the pressure points, they don't get to speak. And do you know the consequences of it? They're equally as bad as if you were, muffled. You were a person who could speak, but somebody put a muzzle on you and you had to go through the years never speaking. Well, it's the same thing you do when you muzzle the body. It is going to react to not just stiffness, but insomnia and aggression and frustration and build up and build up and build up. Then Big Brother, as like I said, it hands you a culture of foods and suppressants, video games, which you can then vicariously butcher whoever you want. And so the thing becomes pathological. So I talk to parents like you do, and I say, look, the reason why this client or this person may go and do this wrong or whatever is because you see they're in a culture that is wrong. They're not broken. And what I'm going to do with them in this reading or with this chart is we're going to try and work on it to see how they can get out of that broken system creatively and proactively and using their numbers and finding out who they are with their astrology, because those are like tools. They're like weapons. When you understand what armament you've got psychically, what are your key numbers, what your planets work with you, this year, maybe different the next year. But when you know what you've got in your Aladdin's cave, your armory, then you can say, oh, this year I'm not meant to work with a spear. I'm meant to work with a club. I'm not meant to come at people in the front. I'm meant to, attack them from behind. Or now I'm meant to be totally defensive. Or now I'm meant to be completely passive and neutral. All of this is vital. But basically, the body's movements physically is a form of communication. And when you open up that communication, other deeper parts of the ancestral brain open up that are deeper than the senses 5. They undergird the senses 5. And if that strata, subconscious strata, is silent, then your 5 senses, even though they may be operating enough for you to think, well, they're working, what are you talking about? No, they're not working. They're not working at full pranic level. So therefore, then if they're not working at full pranic level, how can your perception of the world around you or other people around you be clear and clean? How can you be clairvoyant? To be clairvoyant is not to sharpen the 5 senses from the top. It's to get down deep into the medulla and get down into the, past the limbic brain right down into the spinal intelligence and awaken that, which is a kind of an animalistic thing, which is why Hatha Yoga, right, the scorpion movements and all these movements were based on animals. You think that first because they were stupid? It's because they understood that there's a part of our brain. And every culture had this, where you work with the animal totems, and you work with the martial arts, and you work with the serpent energy, right, the kundalini, all of that, to get back, not later as it was made into the priests, which is all in the head, right, but the original Hatha Yoga, the original martial arts wasn't about kundalini as it's been explained today, where energy is descending from above. This is a lie. This is fiction. This is mysteria. Energy doesn't come from above any place. It comes from the core within to the surface within.
Right.
And back. Just like it is when you go to sleep. Why do you feel sleepy? Because something flags, energy recedes to the core, and you start feeling drowsy, and you'll even fall over if you don't go to bed. And then when you wake up in the morning, there's some energy descending from above, some crown chakra. Bullshit, right? It's moved from the crown chakra, but it's not where you think it is. That's all that priest shit of ups and downs and aboves and belows and slaves and masters. But the man who's free, who knows, I am my slave and master. I know what heaven and hell is, what diabolos and what God are. God is my core, and the so-called Satan, after the maniacs stopped talking about it, is just the surface. It's the ego that faces the world, that has to learn from worldly experience. But I have a core reservoir that is accumulated over the years. And the communication between those two hemispheres must not be armored, like Reich is saying. They have to be fluid. And there's only one way to get it fluid. The mind can't do it. You have to move. You've got to get the body moving. And you have to do it, and just running around the track isn't going to do it. Playing handball, I mean, every member of parliament goes to swat a fucking, squash ball about, but that's not what I'm talking about. It has to be intentional. It has to be intentionalized that you're doing this ritualistically, that you're doing it for purposes. In the beginning, you may not completely understand what it is, but as you go and start reading more of the literature and using these great men of Bruce Lee, as mentors, and even the greater ones behind him, and the great Aikido masters, you get it. And when I watch the Water Margin, or I was Monkey, or I watched Chuck Norris, or Steven Seagal, any of these guys, that's what I was looking at. Yeah, I admired the fact that they could overcome an enemy, but I was looking at what it means to be manly, to be like, oh my God, what the hell is this shit? This is
exactly. Yeah.
Right? But this is like the silent flute. This is like shit. And this to me was deeply, deeply spiritual. Deeply spiritual, and as I learned more and more about it, I've just simply built on that knowledge, built on it to understand its absolute preciousness. And if I had my time to start over again, or if I was back in a role teaching children again, Jesus, it would be the somatic. I would be bringing in somebody like you right away. I'd be saying, yeah, I got stuff to talk to you, but we're going to do that a bit later. And I would do the Steiner thing. I would get the kids out in the morning and be working with the body energies, and only after the puff, they've had they're like almost sweating with adrenaline at that point, when there's a natural need for repose now. So going into the classroom, sitting down, stretching out, feeling the body. And now when there is this moment of repose, then an intellectual type of direction can begin. And even then, it has to be of a certain kind, which Steiner and Krishnamurti knew. It can't be authoritarian. It has to include, and it has to be curious, and it has to be rebuttal, and it has to be argumentative, and all of that. Even then, there's a certain way to do that. But my God, even besides that, the body must move, because I feel that we should all be wanting revenge on the sometimes up to 15 years of chronic caging and negation of the bodily energy. We went into this in the hermit, and we get into the hangman, it'll be even more, because that's what that guy's trying to do. He's going to go, it's all over, mate. I'm not, I disagree with the stasis of the body. And once I'm into that, then I know I'm making, a prana move on many levels, and that creates a deeper sense of clairvoyance, a bodily clairvoyance. It's not really of the senses at all. It's a sort of 6th, 7th, and 8th sense, because the body itself, these underlying areas of consciousness have become awakened, and they will help them to widen, as Blake said, right? They break how did he describe it? It's like, a river with the banks. They flood over. It floods over, and the senses are blasted open into a greater sense of vision. you know, and he was a very, very fiery person. He was like a kind of an Aries. He was actually born in Sagittarius, very fiery person, you know. So I know that for him, walking and bodily exercise was extremely important, you know. But it has to be with intention. Obviously, you know, you're aware of that. It can't just be swatting balls around, you know.
No, and it can't be forced, like you said. It has to be you got to create an environment where that natural exuberance and that natural energy wants to flow, and you're just directing and working with the flow and learning about it. If you're trying to force things like what they do in schools, is force these kids to sit down, sit still, or we're going to smack you with a ruler or whatever. There's no reason nobody's learning anything, or that's the reason nobody's learning anything, is because the mind is not and the body's not primed to learn something, and they just can't say, "Oh, we have a 45-minute gym class, you know, every couple of days or whatever." That's not enough, you know. I totally agree. It's got to be hands-on. It's got to be a combination of things, and it can't be forced at all.
Yeah, there was we had several gyms. You know, physical culture has been big in Ireland, you know. But I was so poor I couldn't afford it, so we'd go and sneak into the gym and just watch the martial arts. We knew the teacher because we had gone down to ask him about standing on, but it was always too costly, so we just sit on the balcony to watch the moves. And you can learn a lot just from just watching and then doing it yourself, you know, the punch bag or some of the basic exercises kind of thing. Okay. And so that's how I learned the basic Qigong, you know. Later I had to go back to the net and brush up on it, but basic, not Qigong, it was a basic Aikido, because the warm-up exercises of Aikido, those are absolutely top-notch. And so you could learn most of what was really needed just by watching these guys. We didn't have the money to pay for it, and, you know, no way. We couldn't even afford to bus money down to the freaking leisure center, you know, but at least we could watch how they did it and then go home and, you know, do it ourselves. And then watching, you know, all the kung fu stuff, you know. I mean, you can't imagine how big, I don't know if you know in Ireland how big, you know, Fu Manchu and all that, you know, back in the 70s, the kids were absolutely obsessed. They'd put the bands around their head and run huge gangs of these kids.
Yeah.
Absolutely running riot. It was one of the biggest things, bigger than skateboards, bigger than breakdancing. It was Fu Manchu and the hordes of, you know, martial art warmongering and stuff like that, and all sorts of programs like that where people were obsessed back in Ireland, you know. It was a very strange thing to see, you know. But there they were all dressed up in black with their red headbands and all.
Oh, I can imagine.
Stopping everybody, you know, and so martial arts has had a huge, huge part in people around us. You know, it's just, if you couldn't participate in it because, you know, money wasn't there, then, you know, you still would watch the shows and, you know, go down to the leisure center, look through the window and see what they're doing, you know. All the middle class guys, you know, were able to pay for these long classes, and especially kung fu and things like that were very expensive because they're so lengthy. You know, the classes go on, and
yeah,
they're very, 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 very. Jiu-jitsu, I'm thinking more. That was more intense, and, you know, it was more pricey because only a certain amount of people could commit to regimens of that kind and stuff, you know. And in those days, in the 70s, there wasn't more free, cheap classes, you know. There wasn't that. Yeah. You had to commit to a teacher who was much more stringent and much more, you know, like a dictator, and they wanted their weight in gold, you know, for you to join the club and all that stuff. And there was just no way, you know. As I said, I couldn't even afford to bus fares down to these particular gyms. And so it was impossible. So you had to pick it up in other ways. But it was a lifelong interest. And then finally, when I realized the spiritual aspects of it are equally dominant, you know, it continued. So I have a great admiration, you know, for what you're doing. And I'm a big advocate of it. I think that much, much more important than some of the intellectual stuff. That's important too. But the children, the political systems, the way we're moving forward, it's only going to happen when the soma, the body itself, is incorporated. And then when the body's exhausted, in a positive way, healthy way, then comes a moment where there's a receptivity, and it's at that point then that a teaching of an intellectual mode, you know, comes to play. So maybe we can get into that in other interviews, but, you know, I'm gonna have to go get something to eat right now. But that's a very, very important aspect of all of this as well.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, and well said. And we'll definitely do some more on it. I'm working on producing my own work. For those listening, I finally got my new site up. It's called wayoftetruthwarrior.com. I'm going to be adding all kinds of commentaries and articles and information for you. There's already a lot of stuff there already to get people started, just so they can understand the philosophy behind this. And I'm trying to build this in the context of what's happening in the world and the whole importance of being aware and becoming a martial artist in life, and how we can utilize this great body of knowledge, just like you've done with your work, Michael. I look up to you and what you've done, and you've inspired me to try to bring forward what I have to offer and what I've spent my life studying. And you've actually brought out a lot of amazing points that many martial artists would never even know. Even though they might be masters of the physical arts, they're missing out completely. So we're trying to tie this all back together, bring it up to the fore, and provide solutions for people. So we'll wrap this interview up today with that. I think it's a good positive note to finish with, and everybody can go and check out the sources and the links we're going to provide in this video. And I also look forward to the upcoming show we're going to be doing on the Hermit.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We'll do that next week because there's, again, even in 3 hours we couldn't get into everything, so there'll be really a lot of brilliant points to get into from that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks, Michael, for your time, and we'll have this up soon. And ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in, and we will definitely catch you next time.